Fiction can be a powerful force in our lives. It can teach us life lessons, allow us to bond with those around us, let us explore vast worlds and characters, and even help us to parse through our very own emotions that may be plaguing us in the moment of experiencing said fiction. These stories can be told to us through various mediums, like movies, books, music, and of course, video games. Many video games tell amazing stories, but one series has consumed my every waking thought since I first started playing it. It's a series that has made me laugh, made me cry, and made me pace around my room in pure hype. It's a series that I will not forget until my last breath. The series I am talking about, as you can tell from the title of the video, is Nihon Falcom's Trails series. Now, I did not learn of the Trails series' existence until early 2016, maybe late 2015, when I was getting ready to graduate from high school and begin my time at college. At the time, I was a fairly big fan of the Persona series, with Persona 3 FES being one of my favorite games of all time. At this point in my life, I had recently finished Persona 4 and was really looking forward to Persona 5's release, and then it was delayed. Again. Yeah, remember this game was supposed to come out in 2014 and we didn't actually get it until 2017 over here in the West? I was looking for a game to scratch that Persona itch to tide me over until Persona 5 released, and I happened across this game on GameStop's website called Trails of Cold Steel. It seemed to check all of the boxes for me. Turn-based battles, interesting characters, anime-like art style, social elements, high school setting, the whole deal. So I just bought it on a whim. Little did I know that this game would haunt me like no other. I could not wait to get home from school just to see what happened next. It was safe to say that by the end of this game, this series had dug its claws into me and it didn't look like it was ever going to let go. And now, 10 games deep, I can say with absolute certainty that it did in fact not let go. I'm in for the long haul, gamers. So with the recent release of Trails into Reverie in the West, which marks the end of an era for the series basically, as well as the recent news that Kuro no Kiseki, also known as Trails Through Daybreak, will be getting a Western release sometime next year, I wanted to take the time to just talk about the many aspects of the series that I love. Just a disclaimer though, this video is not a review, so you will not be getting my more nuanced thoughts on the pros and cons of the series. This is just me gushing about the games. Maybe I'll do the former at some point in the future. This will also be as spoiler-free as I can make it, so do not worry if you are not caught up on the series, or even if you have never touched a Trails game in your life. With that being said, let's get started. I know I compared the series to Persona earlier, but both series are very different. For those who don't know, Trails is a sub-series of the Legend of Heroes series, which is itself a spin-off series of the Dragon Slayer series. I'm not going to get too into the specifics here, just know that if you want to get into Trails, you don't have to play any of the games that came before Trails in the Sky, as they are not connected to the rest of the series. You see, the entire Trails series takes place on the fictional continent of Zemuria, and tells one big overarching story that is split into multiple arcs. Each arc takes place in a different nation on Zemuria and follows a different cast of characters. As the series progresses, characters from earlier arcs show up in later ones and play pivotal roles, which really lends to the whole connected nature of the games. The overarching story itself is intriguing to be sure, but the individual stories of the separate arcs are what really grabbed my attention at first. Each arc offers a somewhat different experience that still manages to capture that Trails feeling. The Liberal arc is your more traditional JRPG, with a journey around the country as the main characters seek to become full-fledged members of the Bracer Guild, all the while being pulled into a political conspiracy. The Crossbell arc sees you play as a group of police officers in an advanced city that is ravaged by corruption. The Erebonia arc sees you playing as a group of students from all different backgrounds, who come together as a unit and grow up both physically and mentally as they find a means of making a difference in their home nation that is so geared towards warfare. Even beyond these incredibly basic summaries, the narratives of the individual games themselves tell stories of love, tragedy, family, and pure adrenaline-filled hype. In both the large scale of the series as a whole, and in the arcs themselves, Trails is truly an epic fantasy that can stand next to any contemporary, both within the medium and without. The themes present in each arc are also phenomenally done. Liberal's themes of family and bonds, Crossbell's themes of freedom and working together to weather the storm and get over seemingly insurmountable barriers, Erebonia's themes of finding a third way and to live with the hope of a better tomorrow, all of them work to make these games some of the most memorable stories I've ever had the pleasure of experiencing. But it is that interconnectivity that really adds the spice to the whole meal. Actions and events within the games have long-lasting consequences on the story and the continent of Zemuria as a whole, consequences that will need to be and are, for the most part, addressed. This all just adds to the stakes in a way that I find fairly refreshing. The games do not constantly need to place the characters in life-threatening situations in order to have high stakes. Even just the idea that a main character might be too late to a situation or wrong about a specific thing might lead to large consequences that last for multiple games. I know I'm tiptoeing around the point here in order to avoid any specific spoilery examples, but just know that even though the characters might not be in mortal danger in a specific situation, the stakes can still be very high, and that is something that I really love about these games. Lastly, on this section of the video, I want to talk about the feeling of completeness with each arc. Despite the series being a very long-running series, the individual arcs and games do have satisfying conclusions that simultaneously feel like a definitive end, but also show that something new is on the horizon. So the fact that the series has yet to end does not detract from the feeling of finality at the end of each arc. Crossbow's a little different because Falcom is clearly leading into more, but it does have a conclusion. Trails of Cold Steel 4, for example, has one of my favorite endings in any video game ever, and I think that is in part due to how well written the story of the Erebonian arc is, as well as how conclusive that ending felt. I legit struggled to hold back tears when I saw the words, "Trails of Cold Steel has come to an end," and "See you again, someday, somewhere." Man, these games are so freaking beautiful. I was trying to avoid talking about them in the previous section, but Trails has some of my favorite characters in any media. The story would not be as good as it is without these amazing characters shaping it. From the first game, you can already tell that Falcom has long-term and short-term character writing almost down to a science. Main characters are immediately built to be realistic and oftentimes relatable. Many even fall into some cliches, but even then, there's something about them that just feels human. This feeling is amplified by how the characters develop over both the course of their arcs, as well as the series as a whole. Even characters that I dislike for either a lack of depth or just being a general piece of shit have me pulling complete 180s a few games later. I legit don't think I can name a single main character that I dislike from the series in terms of writing. Trails also gives many of its side characters an amount of depth and development that you could see in some main characters in other stories. No other game series has ever made me as hyped to see a random NPC from a questline like 4 games back as people were when Spider-Man showed up in Captain America Civil War. On that note, the main casts of each arc are amazing, not just individually, but also in their relationships with each other in the group. I know that some have complaints about certain main cast members in each arc, but I legit love them all. I would be remiss, however, if I neglected to mention the main protagonists of the series. They are legitimately some of the best protagonists I've ever seen in anything. Estelle and Reen especially are 2 of my favorite characters of all time. The growth they both go through throughout their respective story arcs are a thing of beauty. Estelle, going from a rash, inexperienced, hit first, ask questions later kind of girl, to a measured, mature, for the most part, competent young woman who never lost that youthful energy and fiery personality, is one of the highlights of the Liberal arc for me. Reen's journey from a wayward soul with no place in the world to finding that place and becoming depressed when it's threatened, to a guilt-ridden and tortured soul with no regard for his own life, to someone who sees the value in his existence and the importance of living on to see a better future with the ones he cares about, is so damn beautiful. This is not to say that the other protagonists like Lloyd, Kevin, and C are also not super well done, because they are. All of the Trails protagonists are amazing in their own ways. Finally, the various villains of the series stand up to some of the best in the entire genre. There are some cliched ones and some who aren't as fleshed out, to be sure, but when the series nails an antagonist, it delivers. Many speak of Osborn's build-up as an antagonist over 7 games as the pinnacle of the series, which I agree with, but that is not to detract from the other antagonists like the members of Ouroboros, or the more political-based antagonists that shall remain unnamed to avoid spoilers. Just know that there is no shortage of well-written antagonists in the series who can gain your respect, your hatred, or even your understanding. And there is no more exciting feeling than finally facing them at their strongest. Alright, I've avoided this topic long enough. When people talk about Trails, they mention that its greatest strength is its world building, and I completely agree. The world building in Trails is like no other I have seen in gaming. The nations of Zemuria are fully fleshed out. Towns and cities have their own customs and economies. The delicate political relations, both within and between the nations, are fully explored, and the mysteries of an ancient civilization lurk in the shadows. The world feels so alive. This is in no small part due to the politics of the series. On the international front, you have nations like the two superpowers, Erebonia and Calvard, being at each other's throats, with smaller nations like Lyrical and Crossbell being caught in the center of it all. Natural disasters, wars, and technological advances lead to lasting consequences on a global, or I guess continental, political scale. Even within the nations themselves, rival political factions battle for supremacy, leading to greater tension in the narrative. It is all so interesting in a way that I lack the eloquence to properly describe. Speaking of, the technology itself adds so much to the world building. The series uses an ancient energy source known as orbal energy, which uses machines called orbments to draw energy from special gems known as quartz to perform certain functions. These orbments can be used for anything from communication to transportation to weaponry to small devices used for battle known as battle orbments, which is basically how characters can use arts, which is kind of like an equivalent to magic, but not really because magic already exists in the Trails universe, but that's not important right now. This technology not only allows for a very interesting setting that mixes early 20th century, modern, and futuristic aesthetics in a seamless way, but it also affects the world in real time. We see the effects of this orbal revolution similarly to our own world's industrial revolution, but to a much greater and faster scale. These advancements affect the political and economic relations between the nations. In this sense, the rapid advancement of technology is seen as both a boon and an issue as societal and political changes struggle to keep up with technological and economic ones, which is also not to discredit the importance of the constantly advancing weaponry in a continent where international tensions are at their peak. We can also further see these advancements within the settings of each arc themselves. Lyrical from the Sky games is a much more traditional JRPG setting, with some advanced technology seen here and there, but it is mostly centered in the Zeiss region, which houses the Zeiss Central Factory, or ZCF, which is the technological heart of the kingdom. Crossbell from Zero and Azure is much more advanced due to its location and position as a major trade city sandwiched between the two superpowers. Things like cars, skyscrapers, cell phones, and even the internet make an appearance here, which lends to a key narrative in the arc regarding dispelling the corruption in the so-called City of Sin. Erebonia, in the first two Cold Steel games, is almost a mixture of the two. Many towns and cities are still more reminiscent of the late 19th, early 20th century Europe, but cars and orbital computers are a bit more commonplace than in Lyrical. This lends to a major conflict in the arc between the traditional noble faction of the imperial government and the modern reformist faction, which leads to rising tensions. In Cold Steel 3 and 4, we see this technology advance even further, with the Leaves Branch campus buildings being much more modern. This newer technology also opens up more mysteries regarding the ancient Zemurian civilization, which was able to create far more advanced items like artifacts and even flying cities. Not to mention the mysteries surrounding the Septarians, the so-called sacred treasures of the goddess, which hold a major importance in the series' narrative. The last thing that I love about the world building are the various factions that play within the continent. The nations are not the only big players in the field. You also have religious organizations like the Septian Church, guilds like the Bracer Guild, mercenary groups like the various Jaeger Corps, and of course the mysterious and elusive Society of Ouroboros. These factions often have their own motivations and rules that lead to both cooperation and conflict with the others. It all leads to the world feeling just much more alive in that sense. Enough talk about the writing, let's talk about the gameplay itself. Trails is probably my favorite turn-based battle system of all time. The games, up until and including Reverie, use what is known as the action time system. Battles are fought in an arena and each action has a specific range. For example, characters with a gun are able to attack from farther away, while a character who punches needs to get up close and personal. Actions also have an area of effect, like a line or a circle, which allows for multiple enemies or allies to be affected. This leads to an interesting risk-reward setup, where you can benefit from having all of your characters bunched up for large area buff arts, but increase the risk of an enemy doing massive damage to all your party members with a single attack. The turn order is also always on display on the sidebar. Each action has an assigned delay value, which dictates when your character will get their following turn. Smaller actions have a smaller delay, and the big arts and attacks have much larger values. Arts also require time to cast, which is something that needs to be kept in mind. Manipulating the turn order is a necessity, as bonuses like guaranteed critical hits and status ailments may show up tied to a specific turn spot. Besides arts and normal attacks, there's also crafts, which are unique moves a character can perform. These use craft points, or CP, which are gained by attacking and taking damage. Each character has an S-craft, which is basically their ultimate move, that can be activated for at least 100 craft points, and will use all of the CP, but becomes stronger when a full 200 CP are used. What I really love about this battle system is that it keeps you on your toes. You have a great deal of control over the battle, seen with how you can make it so that some of the final bosses in the series don't even get a turn in their boss fight. But if you mess up, that same boss can get 30 turns before you even get one. Not to mention the fact that there is still some level of luck involved, so if a strategy doesn't work for a few tries, you can keep trying to get better bonuses or boss actions. On the customization side, the series uses something similar to the materia system from Final Fantasy VII. Each character can be customized through their orbment. You can place quartz into a given slot to upgrade your character's stats, or give them a bonus ability. Each quartz is of one of these 7 elements, with each element being tied to a specific stat point, like fire for strength or earth for defense. In the Sky and Crossbell games, each quartz also has an elemental value, which can be used to give characters new arts. In Cold Steel and Reverie, the arts are just given as a part of the quartz instead. I love this customization system as it allows for the creation of some really fun builds, especially in the Cold Steel games, where you can make some ridiculously broken characters, which is super fun to me. It also means that less emphasis is placed on levels, and grinding is often discouraged in the games themselves. Orbment and accessory setup is much more important, which I think is really cool. So this section is going to be very short. I love the music in these games. Sound team JDK are amazing. I have legitimately loved every soundtrack I've listened to in this series. From battle themes to town themes to general ambience, the music in this series is absolutely amazing. I use a lot of the songs in my videos, and don't even get me started on the final boss themes. Good lord, are these amazing. Songs like The Merciless Savior, The Azure Arbitrator, Great Power, EOV, To a Glimmering Tomorrow, Majestic Roar, Celestial Coalescence, and The Perfect Steel of Zero, just to name a few. The music in this series has made me smile, made me cry, and made me dance. It will always remain in my playlist. This final section is a little more specific than the others. It regards how the series handles its NPCs, and in this case, I am not just referring to the major ones. Most of the NPCs in this series are named, and many have their own character arcs and lives that exist completely removed from the main story. Speaking with them after major story points doesn't just trigger some non-important dialogue that you already know. They'll mention things about their home life or their dreams. And in the best cases, you'll see these NPCs develop and learn in their own small stories. Like the young noble girl from Ordis, who befriends and later falls in love with the young poor boy from the neighboring city of Raquel, despite her father's disdain for commoners after his wife's death. Or the couple in Trista, who is undergoing marital problems due to the husband's increased focus on his job, all the while their son is caught in the middle. And let's not forget the 2 goats, Anton and Ricky, who travel together in pursuit of Anton's love life, much to Ricky's reluctance. These characters make the world feel so much more lived in, and I don't think I've seen another game do it to this scale. And it's amazing how some of these characters won't even get side quest tie-ins that lead the player to interact with these side stories. They're just sitting there for the curious player to find, and it just fleshes out Zemuria even more for me. So there you have it. These are just some of the major aspects that I love from this series. I couldn't get into everything as I wanted to avoid spoilers as much as possible, so this video might seem like just some generic series is good video to some, but I want to be clear that I really do adore all 10 of the games that I've played in this series thus far. These games have saved me from some very dark times, and I really believe that Falcom has made something truly special with this series. If you've yet to try this series out, I encourage you to do so. You will not regret it. If you have played the games, please let me know what you love about the series in the comments down below. I only ask that you be respectful, as discourse about this series can get heated, for lack of a better term. So yeah, just be kind, please. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful week.